From season 15, episode 6, Waves of Wonder. Beautiful painting. Clouds were way too tall. I didn't have enough room for my ocean portion of this. Second attempt was just a trashed wave, and I just couldn't get the whole gist of the whole thing. So this is my third and final attempt. Just laying down the sky, just doing that toucan method, and then doing the dark on the top. This time I mapped out my cloud distance to the horizon, to the top of the page, so that makes sure that I don't go too far down, because I needed that room for the wave and the rocks and the beach. So I just made sure I limited myself, or not limited myself, but oriented myself within the poster. So now I'm going to lay down some of the shadows. And one thing about doing it multiple times, 2 or 3 or 4 times, is that you always learn something from the last one you did. So what I did was I made sure the sky was nice and pretty tacky to dry. I didn't use any clear or anything like that this time. I just laid down the paint and then just started building my shadows, just using his painting for a reference. Just kind of build off of that. So it's a real light, muted, bluish, grayish, purpley color. And I knew at this point, kind of got a gist of building upon, meaning that started just block things in for now. Don't try to make them look like anything that much. Just put something down so you can work with it. And it's always going to be just slightly tacky if you're just continuing to work. It will start to dry and dry and dry and dry, things like that, but it will always, you can always loosen it with the next paint that goes on top of it. It's not until it just becomes completely dry where it's just going to lay over the top of it. So right now, as you can see, I'm laying down some white, and it is pulling some of the blue and some of the shadow tones from the clouds that I put down. And so I knew at this point, I'm just going to block in the white. I'm not going to try to make it look a whole lot like clouds. I knew just get the white shapes down. And then I'm going to come back and do layer after layer after layer. And I found that building layers on top of layers when it comes to clouds really creates that deep kind of three-dimensional effect, and also gives you the chance to get a more fluffier look without it looking too opaque and whipped creamy. So I'm just using that angled soft nylon brush for the entire cloud process, just building white upon white and just using these swirl, almost circular motions, but also trying to get those kind of like, I don't know what you call them, but just kind of like irregular puffs of clouds, so it doesn't look like just a bunch of circles. So there's kind of that, I would say, kind of drawing the outlines of a cloud edge along with fill in at the same time. Always trying to be mindful of not completely whiting out the shadow, but trying to incorporate that as well, leaving a little of the background. And one of the things I did learn from the other clouds that I've done so far is to build that kind of deep background shadow look, which really gives the cloud a sense of like your look. There's an underneath to it, and there's a like a pillow that you're looking at the bottom of the pillow if you were holding it up in the air. So this is just all about just building on top of, kind of that wet on semi-wet. I'm getting a little closer here so you can see what I'm talking about. So see how I'm just kind of cutting in the top to try not to make it look too circular, but more like that irregular cloud shape, so it looks a little bit more realistic. And here I'm choosing places to make it super white, because that really looks cool with the contrast. So now I've just laid down some more transfer paper with adhesive, light adhesive, and I'm going to do the horizon with that navy blue, just laying it on, and then coming back with some dark and then some light, back and forth, back and forth. Actually, I'm sorry, I laid down the medium blue, and now I'm putting down the navy blue. So this is navy blue to create the face of the waves in the background, because they're supposed to be darker and then you do that light edge on top and then a final foam on top to make it look like it's facing up towards you, so that there's a dark face towards you to get that wave. So now I'm just putting down the white foam on top of the wave. This is where it's kind of cool because all the blue is still wet. If it's too white and too glaring, you can come back with a little lacquer thinner on the same brush and kind of blend it a little bit so it blends into the blue. You could pull the blue into the white so it doesn't look so just like pure white, and it really looks neat because it gives kind of a more water effect. So it's neat to be able to dab into lacquer thinner whenever you want to pull paint together within the painting itself. The fun pull the contact paper off moment. Now the one bummer about this is it left a line where the paint ended there in the painting, and you can actually see it. It's like a little bump and ridge. So that's something that either I'll need to sand or do differently because there's too much paint buildup. So now I'm going to try to attempt the wave, and this is where I ran into more trouble, and I ended up wiping it off I'd say about 3 or 4 times before I got a hold of the whole thing. And I was just putting way too much paint on, trying to figure out how to do this whole gradient. This is where I finally got it to a point where I felt like I can go ahead and work with it, build upon it, and hopefully fix it. And I'm just putting in some of those foam lines with the liner brush for now, just to get the shape of the wave going, thinking that I was kind of settled on how it was going to look at this point. But while I was doing this, I realized, hey, I'm starting to pull some of the upper light, I'd say iridescent portion of the wave down into the darker colors, and it was starting to create kind of like a blend, I would say liquidy blend, not like a soft airbrushy kind of blend or spray paint blend. So what I did was I went ahead and grabbed my brush and started dipping it in the lacquer thinner and start pulling up and then pulling down, pulling up, pulling down. So drawing them into each other with the lacquer thinner. So that's just a cup full of lacquer thinner. And I found out, hey, it's starting to blend, but it's looking more posterized than that soft gradient blend you could get in other techniques. But I felt like it was better than it was. So I was pretty happy with how it got to that point. I found out that you can also go too far with it too, like anything else. You just have to figure out when's the best place to stop. I put these lines in. I feel like now I realize in hindsight I put them in sooner than I should have. I should have just waited till the painting was at the more final completed stage rather than doing it right now. And so I go ahead and here's where I'm using an angle brush, that soft nylon brush, to continue the blending technique. I'm dipping it into the lacquer thinner and doing some more of the blending back and forth, back and forth. You can see it's working and it's creating a blend, but it's creating more like a posterized blend because this paint is actually starting to set. It's getting dry and dry and drier as we speak. It is a fast drying paint after all. But as you can see, it is kind of creating that blend effect, but more of a posterized look. And I decided at this point just to start wiping out those lines that I put in because I felt like they were too light, they were too white. There's where I made kind of a little weird kind of bubbly look right there by the, because I didn't want to wreck the yellow part of it. Now we're jumping into the rocks. Kind of feel like this is where it's was going to be pretty solid. I can get those rocks in and do the texture and things like that. Where I was thinking or wondering how it was going to turn out was connecting the foam from the wave to the rocks. So I decided to go ahead and do everything at once, similar to what he does in the painting, where it's wet on wet, thinking and hoping that I'll be able to blend the foam into the rocks, because that's what he does in the painting. He actually makes it look like the foam from the wave is being incorporated, misting into the rocks themselves, which looks really cool because it looks like the wave is part of the rock rather than just how you see a lot of paintings done where they just look like they're just splashing all over the rock and it's just splashing. I really like the way it looks where it's really super blended into it, like it's like the water's going up upon the rock. That looks really cool. And I'm doing, just like he said, trying to do the furthest rock is very muted. It's got the purples and grays and blues. And the next rock forward has the Kona brown. So it's going to be more of a brown color. And it's going to get more, the contrast is going to increase as we go forward with the rocks to create that depth, like cool effect that we like to do. Same old Skippy knife stuff. Still wondering how the foam's going to work out with these rocks. So I just said, well, I'm just going to make the rocks look as good as I can now, and I'll jump on the foam and hope for the best. I forgot to, one of the funny things he said about the cloud in the video is that it looks like an A-bomb. He said, now we know how to paint an A-bomb if you ever need to. Side note there, but I digress. So now I'm starting to foam, and I'm starting out with the white, thinking that it's just blocking it in and start to build it. So it's that back of the wave that's flipping over. And I struggle with that because it was too white and I didn't like that. So I started adding blue and I didn't like that. So I added some more white. I didn't like that. So I kept going back and forth, back and forth. And it's one of those things where it's better to just block it out first with a color, like maybe a medium color or something like that. Let that set, because otherwise, what was happening here? I made it muddy. So here I'm hitting it with a blow dryer, realizing, hey, I need to make this look more streaky. And the only way I'm going to achieve that is if this paint on the poster is drier. And so that's what I did. I ended up eventually getting more streaks of blue and white versus just this big blob of white or this big blob of blue. Now I'm going to start doing the foam, which will be part of the rocks up against rocks. And I'm using kind of the purple, the gray, the white, getting kind of a base color. I didn't want it to be super white. I wanted to start with some shadowy effect and just kind of block it all out. So I just wanted to start out with a base color. And this was just had that kind of combination of grays and purples and blues just to get a color going. I knew not to use just pure white or just pure blue or something like that, because we are working on wet here. I'm still wondering how this is going to work, if I'm going to be able to make it look foamy and misty. And here's where I'm hitting it with some blue now, coming back. I needed to get more contrast, and that turned out pretty good. I was pretty satisfied with that. Now I'm introducing the medium blue, not the full dark blue yet. I just wanted to start building on the foam to get the layers so that the bottom was dark and it builds its way up to light on the top edge. So this is kind of the middle of the road. I knew I was going to come back with the navy blue to make it dark on the bottom, because you got to have that dark shadow like that right there. You got to have that dark shadow on the bottom to create a contrast between the dark and the light. And so now it's just kind of mixing it back and forth, trying to develop it, trying to build it into this kind of foamy you know, kind of whip it around, not get too, I guess, too constricted. Just try to keep it light. I'm using that point, the very point of the brush, just pushing the paint in back and forth into it. And now we're over to the rock area, and I'm still kind of just messing with it. Add a little darker color, a little light color, trying to get shadows. What I was trying to do was build layers of the foam as it was coming into the rocks. So I wanted kind of like these three-tiered sections of foam, because it's kind of what he does in his painting. It looks really cool. And so now I'm going to try and do a combination of pushing it into the rock as well as back into the wave itself. And I was starting to say, hey, this is working. It's starting to look like it's being incorporated into the rock. And so I was pretty stoked. And then I stuck the highlight up on top. And I felt like I was starting to get it dialed. It was starting to really flow just because of the right combination of wet on wet and picking the right colors and just trying to use the brush in more of a sporadic way. Because if you get too, like, I guess, geometric, it's I think that's the only word I can think of right now. It tends to, oh, I plopped a drop, so I just utilize it. Yeah, you just got to really get messy. The messier you get with the brush and whipping around, the better. So I was happy with that foam right there. So I'm going to introduce the next rock, which is that smaller boulder, which is the next tiered closest to us. And he put a more tan colors on his, so I'm going to do that with some highlighting too. I think I do 3 different layers of texture. That's that gray, blue, deep tone, and then I introduce more of a tan. I felt like that was too bright though. It didn't really fit and match, so I think I muted it a little bit. And then I'm also going to push foam into that too. So let's get some of that kind of muty medium blue as a foundation, and then some more of the navy blue as a shadow effect. So now I can take my white and start pulling that. I can pull from the bottom and grab some of that dark blue and push it into the rock and grab some of the rock color. And I think just a combination of those two help just to create that cool effect of the rock just splashing on and misting onto the foam splashing on and misting onto the rock. And then just picking highlight places just to help it stand out. All right, final rock. This one's the full one up in the foreground. That's just, block that in with the Kona brown, and come back and texture the heck out of it. I did quite a few different colors for the texture. Started out with some of that bluish color like he does. I think it was too blue. I should have muted it some more. Maybe even put some brown into it just so it didn't look so, it was almost like water on there. So I come back and kind of knock it down a little bit and mute it just a smidge. And I noticed that was too light too, so I came back with a little darker color. That's that grayer color. And I even introduced black, and I pulled the black from the bottom up just so it's more black shadow effects. Trying to mute all of that texture that I just did. Now it's time to introduce some of the foam in the front. And what I did was I laid down some white, and then I took some of the Kona brown and tried to make this kind of, I guess, watery sheen that was just kind of floating up onto the beach shore. It came out okay, I think. So that's a lot of wet on wet, just bringing the blue, keep building it back and forth, back and forth. It looks pretty pretty cool. Kind of looks like a little bit of a watery, kind of splashy, shiny look. All right, now I'm bringing in the highlight foam, and I put down the white, and I go, whoa, that's too bright. So I came back and I tried to dull it a little bit or mute it a little bit just with lacquer thinner, but then I went over it with a light blue. So I took the light blue and I ran with that. I said, I like that better. I like that better than just pure white. The pure white is too much. It's just too much of a contrast. I like this light blue. And then I was going to come back and highlight that afterwards. So now it's just having fun doing a bunch of swirls. This was actually the reward from the whole painting. This is just a lot of fun to put in the little foamy details. It just really brings the whole painting to life at this point. So now it's still continuing with that blue and just bring it on up. I love this part. This is the fun part because it really makes it come alive. I knew I needed to. I've come down there with a little bit of a darker. I think I did those too much in a row. I think I would have spread those out or made those a little bit more just like sporadic. They look a little bit too pinstripey. I wished I would have done those a little bit spread out some more, or just, I don't know, inconsistent. I think that'll look more natural. I outlined that little weird bubbly blend thing that happened just to make it look like it was supposed to be like that. Yeah, so this was a combination of very challenging and also fun at the same time. But yeah, I think between the clouds and that wave, this was probably one of the most challenging ones that I've done so far, especially that eye of that wave and the blending. That was very, very challenging. But I do hope you get a chance to do something like this. And I want to thank you so much for watching this video. And here is my final painting. Here's Bob's. Take care.